emergency. The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is October 28th, 2012. It is the Sunday edition. And joining me for 2 hours today to go over a vast array of things, including practicing what you preach by actually packing up and getting out of Dodge and changing your life for the better, is my good friend, fellow radio show host, investigative journalist, and all-around pain in the ass to the New World Order, Mr. Bob Tuskin. Bob, welcome back to the broadcast, brother.
Thanks, Popeye. Good to be here, as always. I'm sure this topic of preparedness that we'll be discussing in great length tonight is quite appropriate for those listening on the East Coast, but also everywhere you are, it's a sure thing that you better get prepared if you want to protect yourself from the powers that shouldn't be. And at the end of the day, this is what the elite scumbags know, and that's why they've had people, according to their Agenda 21 type policies, go to the cities, get completely dependent on food coming in from thousands of miles away, on Monsanto, providing the world's growing population with food. And once they are completely stuck, once they are completely hooked up to the feeding tube that is the beast system, they'll be very easy to get into camps and to get ready for whatever they want, whatever eugenics policies they might put forth. At the end of the day, I see these FEMA camps that everyone's talking about, Popeye, as facilities that will be open and people are going to want to go to because, well, they didn't get prepared. They thought it was all good. It was all great. And, there's an EMP attack on our grid. Our system goes down. And next thing you know, they're begging to go to a work camp and be fed government cheese.
I agree. They're going to make these camps, they're not going to make it look scary. I mean, they obviously they will be somewhat intimidating with the guards, double barbed wire fence, all that crap. But on the inside, it's going to look like a shopping mall. And the outside is going to be so, quote unquote, scary to people that, aren't used to personal responsibility, aren't prepared, are used to living in the cities, used to being in this tightly packed grid structure, that, they're not going to want to go out to the middle of the country or go out in the woods and try to survive. They're going to say, screw it. Let's go to the FEMA camp. There's a Starbucks.
Yeah. Well, the people on the outside will be the ones that are demonized, of course, and they'll be made out to be scary. And these people are going to be those darn preppers, those darn constitutionalists, those patriots. And this new show, Pop, I don't know if you've seen this show, Revolution. Have you heard about this?
I have heard it, but I have not seen it myself. And actually, you're like probably the 8th or 9th person that's told me I need to go take a look at this show. Is it like post-war, like 20 years in the future type scenario?
Well, here's what happens. The grid goes down and on the entire planet, and it doesn't come back up. And this is not based on too far-fetched of an idea. I mean, the grid could go down. We are extremely vulnerable to some sort of EMP taking the grid down. And the premise of this show is 15 years later, this is what the world is going to look like, from iPhones to, this sort of, what do they call that type of society? The word's at the tip of my tongue, but it's very much a tribal type society where, they've completely gone back, so to speak. They're using trains again. Slave labor is back in force. And perhaps I should set this up by actually playing their little intro in a future segment here on your show tonight, because I think the intro, although it's being, used by Hollywood to kind of make this seem like it's science fiction, that's what they do. This is definite pre-programming, or what do they call that? Not
predictive programming.
Predictive programming, right? That's the word I was looking for. And there are definite themes within this that I think are, a reality or a possible reality. Especially the way we're headed. They even, I don't have a TV, as you know, Popeye, but I kind of have watched this show as kind of a, to take a look at, some of the subliminals they're putting out there for the general public. And in the show, they go as far as to have the United States of America and former believers in that are the new patriot terrorist. And they have that whole dialectic of, these are the terrorists and there's this rogue government. And I mean, it's quite bizarre that they put all this right in front of your face, and then they make it more sexy than it really is, adding all sorts of BS love stories and, fight scenes and whatnot. And what it does for the average person out there is it makes it seem twice removed, that this type of event could never happen. We could never have this. This is just on a TV show.
There's another show called Fringe, where and I literally just found this out yesterday. I did not know that. I've heard about the show. I'd heard the title of the show, I should say, but I'd never really looked into it because I don't watch TV. And somebody brought it to my attention yesterday, and I watched an episode. They were like, "Just watch this episode. Just watch. Just. It's a random episode in the middle of the series," and my jaw hit the floor, because the basic premise of the show itself is invaders from outer space came in and took over the planet and started putting humans that didn't agree with them and didn't go along or talked bad about them or whatever in FEMA camps.
Well, there you go, right in front of your face, sheeple. Get ready to be herded into one of these camps. But I feel that, everybody talks about how us dissidents, us people out there, standing up for the truth are going to be the ones that are put into the camps. I don't see that as necessarily so. I do feel that there's just this general plot against humanity, and that at the end of the day, you and I, Popeye, well, I hate to say this, buddy, we're irrelevant.
Oh, I agree. Those camps are not for, I don't believe the camps are for specific patriots and stuff like that, because some of those camps are made to house, or handle, like here in Florida, we have the Chrome Detention Facility. They can handle something like 1 million people. And that's over the course of maybe 24-hour period if they had to, at full functioning capability. So Lord knows what the real capabilities are over at this detention facility. But I don't believe it's for you or me or, Jimmy X or Doug Owen, because they own networks.
Oh, well, Doug Owen will be on the list. Don't worry.
Well, I don't think. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if we were rounded up, but I don't think that. I don't think the camps are specifically built just for dissidents. I think
the camps aren't built for us, but you know what might be built for us are those mass graves.
That could be. Now, see, that's more likely of a scenario where you kill the dissidents and then put all the sheep.
How many bullets did they buy from Homeland Security? Billions of rounds?
Something like that. But Bob, it's just for target practice. Come on.
They're sitting on it to make the price go up and for us to not have access.
You know, that's also a possibility. We can get into that on the other side of the break. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. Break sneaking up on Bob and myself. We'll be back in a few minutes. Go get a cup of coffee and then come back and tune in. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. And Bob made a good point, first segment, about the FEMA camps. And I just want to stay focused on this for a second. I think a lot of the purpose, one of the biggest purposes of the camps is to instill fear. I'm not saying that they wouldn't be used. I mean, that would be asinine if they went and did all this work and then didn't use them, or at least planned to use them, if it was just a facade. I do believe that they would use them, but I really don't think that the camps are specifically built just for dissenters, and they're going to come out and it's going to be Mad Max and Road Warrior. I don't think it's going to. It could be like that. That's like the worst case shit hits the fan scenario, and I mean it could get to that. But I don't think we need to. As I said this on Friday, we don't need to let it get to that. But I think the camps will be primarily for the mass general public, because that's who they're going to have to control.
Yeah. It will definitely be for the masses. And the catalyst for this, well, it could be a number of different things. And I know a lot of people out there are kind of weary of people fear-mongering about this storm, which has been called the hybrid storm, the Frankenstorm, the harped-up Sandy, going right towards our capital.
Oh, Hurricane Sandy.
Hurricane. And, you know, I think it's funny that a big part of the talk about this hurricane has revolved around the presidential dog and pony show, this complete distraction. You know, Barry Soetoro goes to the big White House, and he is there as commander-in-chief because that comes first. And on the news report today, the national news, I heard that, even though he's going back to the White House to, you know, do his number one job, which is not campaigning, or, you know, being a figurehead, it's to be the commander-in-chief, right? Well, not really. There's a shadow government in control. But they had to remind the listeners that even though he's going back to do that job, that, well, in a situation where a hurricane strikes, it's not the federal government that's involved. They say, well, even though he's going back, this will still be ran by local governments. And I think that was kind of a subliminal in there, whether they consciously know this or not, to get us ready for what we saw in Katrina, which is not necessarily local governments being out of the loop, but local governments facilitating National Guards and other military agencies, and even worse, facilitating people like, Blackwater and other private, militias that are essentially used to control the masses and to keep them in that state of emergency.
And it's a huge fallacy that that's even required, because unless the place is unless it's like Detroit and the shit hits the fan. I mean, Detroit's already a bad spot, but most of these places, Bob, you've lived through hurricanes. I've lived through hurricanes. When a storm comes through and the power's out and the cops can't be everywhere at once, what happens? You have armed citizens that'll sit and they'll have checkpoints and stuff in their own neighborhoods. And you know what? Crime isn't like you'd think it is. There's not mass looting and all this other crap. I don't know if you remember this, but when Hurricane Wilma came through here about 5 years ago, when Katrina came through here, Hurricane Wilma came through a month afterwards, and we had no power for like 2 weeks. I don't know if you remember, but they actually enacted a curfew down here where after 8 o'clock at night, you couldn't be outside. People were getting arrested all over Broward County and Miami-Dade County for quote-unquote violating curfew. I remember this because I was like, F you and F your curfew. I walked around, I got hassled by the cops all the time. But
I'm so glad my parents couldn't arrest me.
Well,
violating curfew.
Yeah, right. That would have been horrible when you were a kid. But it's like having a big nanny. That's what.
I know.
That's what this is like. It's like having parents looking over your shoulder, and nobody. I don't think anybody. Not many people realize. A lot of people thought, well, there was all this looting going on. No, there wasn't. The problem was there was stories of quote-unquote widespread looting going on all over Broward.
There was, and it was in concentrated areas, and it was the black blocs, perhaps, the provocateurs.
It was a few houses getting broken into. But
and it was blown out of proportion. Yeah,
for the most part, everybody's armed in Florida. We're in the South.
They should be, but, we have situations like we saw in Katrina where rather than allowing for that to be a protection mechanism, a built-in protection mechanism, they went around and took guns out of old ladies' hands and completely violated their Second Amendment.
After they beat the living crap out of the old lady, don't forget that.
Oh, yeah, I can't forget that. I mean, who can forget those images? It will stay with me for the rest of my life. And local police departments, many of them, are completely under the control of what they perceive to be orders from higher ups, and that's the federal government.
But Bob, this is America. This is America, and here in America, you got to be willing to beat up old women.
Well, before Hurricane Katrina, Popeye, the largest hurricane with the most damage, that is, was Hurricane Andrew, and I was a young kid then, and I remember it like it was yesterday, however, that Hurricane Andrew provided such devastation that really nobody even could do anything but try to help their neighbors out. I mean, at the end of the day, the people, not these thugs with shiny badges on their clothes, the people are going to try to come together. And I hate to say this, this might sound like a bit of a radical statement, but that's what the militia's for. This is why we need a militia. I'm becoming more and more a proponent of a militia and a sheriff's office that is...
But that's real constitutional militia, not FBI control.
No. I like the FBI control. No, yeah, of course, Popeye. It's real... What do you think? I'm an agent provocateur, you schmendrick? Yeah, it's real... I mean, come on now. No, that's what. But you're right, though. There's that stigma that anytime you say militia, oh no, or anarchist. That's the other one. They're persecuting anarchy. Last time I checked, and if you do a simple search and look at the breakdown of the word anarchy, it simply means without a ruler. And last time I checked, nobody wants to have a ruler. I don't want a ruler. I didn't even like my parents ruling me, for crying out loud.
Well, if you look at their definition, and by their I mean the controllers, the manipulators of society, and what they've gotten the mass general public to believe, if you look at their definition of anarchy, it's chaos and mayhem, no one following any sorts of laws, people just being raped in the street, thrown out of their houses, stuff being stolen. Oh, wait a minute, that's what's actually happening right now. So I guess if you look at anarchy in their definition, well, we actually are living their definition of it right now. So why don't we actually live the true definition where we just don't have rulers? And you have I'm for volunteerism. I was a volunteer firefighter. I know it works. The one, there's two firehouses in the town I grew up in. The one that I was a member of had been around, if I remember correctly, it was since 1923. And it was all volunteer. So don't tell me that volunteerism doesn't work. And there's plenty of places like that across this country. I mean, after all, when the first people came over here in the colonies and there was a fire, do you think, and I'm not talking about later on when Ben Franklin invented the first firehouse and they started with the insurance stuff and all this other crap, which you still see today in some places in rural communities where if you don't have an insurance thing from the firehouse if you don't have a placard on the front of your house or haven't paid your bill, they'll sit and watch your house burn. I'm talking about back in the colonies when if one house burned, everything else would probably burn. So people just did it because it needed to be done. They didn't do it because they got paid to do it and stuff. You know what I mean?
But, I also see that at the end of the day, whether or not you think human nature is this nasty, cutthroat being, I really think that if my neighbor's house is on fire, and I think this could be said for anybody listening practically, if your neighbor's house is on fire, you're gonna pick up a hose and help them.
Well, you would
empathy,
hope, Bob. I'm going to cut us off because we got a break
right.
sneaking up on us. But you would hope, Bob, Hurricane Sandy. Now, you've been through hurricanes before. Do you think people should be flipping out and that the news media should be covering it the way they are? Because
yes.
I certainly do not. I think that
I do.
I don't think people should be flipping out, you sarcastic bastard.
No, I do, because it really shows how when Hurricane Aaron on September 10th, 2001 was about to hit New York, how played down and how non-existent the coverage was of that compared to what we have here, which is essentially a very similar storm in a very similar projection.
But, Bob, this is the perfect storm.
This is the perfect storm, though, Popeye.
The George Clooney movie?
I saw the movie.
It's going to sink a fishing boat, and George Clooney's going to die if we don't panic the entire East Coast.
Should freak out in general. I want to be the most fear-mongering guest that they have ever heard on your show. You are all going to die, because after all, we do all die. I know the transhumanists think that they can get around that, but no, you all are going to die. What?
We're all going to die, Tuskin?
Yes, we're all going to die. No, I don't mean to.
Blowing my mind.
I'm not trying to sound morbid here, but I really want people to be fear-mongered. I want people to love the fear porn because at the end of the day, whatever it takes to get you prepared, we need to have you just completely in shock if that's what it takes. We need to have you think that there's terrorists out there that are going to kill us all. We need false flag attacks. If that's what it takes to get you prepared, I mean, because after all, that's what the FEMA and the other agencies, have commercials about these days. They're very much.
All I can tell you is Hurricane Katrina's failure, the response to it, the failure of the government. Everybody blames Bush because he didn't like black people or because of this or because of that. That wasn't a failure. They did that on purpose. Things went exactly as they wanted them to. That was what you would call a test run. In a small, controlled situation, instead of doing it on a nationwide scale. So, people need to wake up. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Tuskin. Sorry. Go ahead.
Very rude to interrupt your guest.
Oh, God. It's been a while since you've been on.
Yeah, why don't you invite me on your show anymore? Is it because I cover the Mossad?
It's because you cover things like Patrick Clawson.
We're going to get to that next hour, folks.
But yeah, in case you guys don't know, I forgot to mention this earlier.
Yeah.
But Bob here confronted that dirtbag that I'm sure everybody remembers. I played the audio, as most alternative radio hosts did, where you had this Israeli lobbyist pretty much calling for a false flag attack on Iran, and he made a comment about one of their subs going down and not coming back up. Well, Bob here called him. He got the phone number, called him up, and actually spoke to the guy and confronted him. In second hour, I'm going to play the audio of that because it's actually really good, Bob. I have to say, you're really good at doing confrontations, and I don't know how you got the guy to talk, because from what I understand, he's not too happy about people recording him or questioning him about this. So I don't know how you got.
Supposedly, he talked like it was the greatest thing ever that I was on the phone with him. So I really don't think he gives two what. At the end of the day, these scumbags are pretty blatant about their agendas, and I think it's pretty obvious. But I want to premiere something on your show, Popeye, that is going to fit with this next story. And I want to bring up an event, just to get away from preparedness and prepping for a moment. And I do still want to touch on that some more. But I want to premiere on Down the Rabbit Hole with my good friend and colleague, Popeye, something that we'll be doing on my show from time to time. And I think it is a very important watchdog in this world where a certain intelligence group is so active.
And now, the Mossad Minute.
That's right, folks. On today's Down the Rabbit Hole, we premiere the Mossad Minute. I'm your host, Bob Tuskin. The Mossad is back in action with a number of different recent acts of war. In the interview that you're about to hear with Popeye that I did with Patrick Clawson, he openly admits that the Mossad and the United States is actively involved in covert acts of war against Iran. Well, I guess they're not so covert when they're blatantly telling us about it. The Mossad recently struck a Sudanese facility that was believed to have ammunition for Iran. And as you know,
did they bomb that, or was that were they working in conjunction with the IDF to take that thing out using airstrikes?
Well, I don't know the Mossad bombed it, but yes, I'm sure the IDF would have been the actual enforcer of that.
But why is Israel bombing things in Sudan, of all places, Bob?
Well, I thought it's interesting that one of those countries left in the world today that doesn't have a central bank includes Sudan, as well as Syria, Iran. You do the math. But, Popeye, the Mossad is just blatantly open about these operations. They're also very open about their control of technology. When I talked to Patrick Clawson, which you'll hear again, he mentioned blatantly that, the Stuxnet and the Flame viruses, they're just, without a doubt, a creation of the Mossad. Folks, that is the world premiere of a brand new segment, the Mossad Minute. All right, Popeye. There you go, buddy.
With our good friend, Payday Monsanto.
No, we're trying to revamp my show and, get more of that polished feel to it because...
You're bringing more production value.
Yeah, I mean, my show is far too amateurish. Amateurish, is that the word? See, there you go. I can't even speak. No wonder people don't listen. But yeah, we're trying to revamp things, and you try to improve and do what you can with what you got. And luckily, we got the help of people, like you said, like Payday and others that can help with our intros and whatnot. So,
well, that's how it works. If everybody works together. Everybody's got different talents, and if they can just do their small part with what their talent that they have, it's amazing how things can come together, and we can operate and reach many more people and actually be more effective than the mainstream loser, dinosaur, dead media. I mean, there's a reason why they have to hire bimbos to come on air in tight little dresses with their tits popping out of their dresses. There's a reason for that. Because,
why are you talking about RT like that?
Yeah. That's not nice.
What did I say? Come on, you're all thinking.
Hey, sex sells, but no, well, see, at least the chicks at RT are allowed to use their brains and allowed to ask real questions.
Yeah.
And I'll give them credit for hiring people like.
Which one do you like, huh? We're both married. Listen to us.
I don't watch Fox or CNN or MSNBC, so I can't tell you. I don't even know what the names of the newer bimbettes.
I really enjoyed Univision, and my Spanish is not fluent, but I think they have the most attractive weather gals.
Spanish TV is really dramatic, to say the least. They do a lot of weird. Well, I guess it's weird to us, but to them it's normal. I'm sure people look at us and they probably say we're weird. So whatever. That's kind of objective, I guess you could say. But they do that because sex sells and the mainstream media sucks. And the only way to get people to pay attention to it is, have some goober who's sitting there watching TV going, wow, I'd like to bang her. See, at least I have to give RT credit. At least they allow the journalists to actually speak. So even if they hire an attractive journalist, there's also brains attached to it, as opposed to listening to Fox News and CNN. The one chick I can't stand, she's actually really smart, but her husband works for Wall Street, is that Erin, I can't remember her last name. She's this
Brockovich?
Yeah, right. That chick had actual morals. I can't remember her name. Her husband's a Wall Street bigwig of some sort, or he works for the banks or whatever.
Erin Rothschild.
Her last name could be Rothschild for all we know. But yeah, she's the only one with any brains up there. She acts like she doesn't have it, but she knows what's up. But see, the only time the mainstream media puts a chick with brains on TV is when they're devious and evil like that. All right, we're going to break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. More with Bob Tuskin from the Bob Tuskin Radio Show when we get back.
Welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole with your host, Popeye.
And my psychotic friend, Bob Tuskin.
I thought we'd sex up your show a little bit, Popeye. That wasn't me, by the way. That was my wife.
Yeah. Well, if your wife has a deep voice like that, that's chat.
I hope she's not listening right now.
No. I know your wife. I've met her.
Have you met my wife?
Yes.
Hey, you're getting out of Dodge, aren't you?
Yes, I am. And by the way, so people, I want to say something really quick there, because I know a lot of times, Bob, you're a magnet for some of the more
chick magnet.
Yeah, right. We'll say you're a magnet for the more interesting folks out there, and a lot of times people will say, they'll make stupid comments about you or whatever, and people will say things that, is Tuskin real? Or let me tell you something. Bob is real. I know him. Okay, I've met him in person. He is a real human being, and he's just like he is on air. He's the same person in person. This is not an act. This is how he actually is as a human being.
Can you believe that? I'm actually this obnoxious in real life. Oh, my goodness.
He really is. But he is I have to tell you something. Even though Bob comes off like an obnoxious bastard at times, he is a good friend. And he has come through for me as a friend outside of the radio genre. So I can vouch for him when I say that he is, he is the real deal. So when you hear him being an arrogant tart on air, he's actually like that in real life too. So it's not an act.
Okay. Well, thanks for that strong endorsement, Popeye.
It's a backhanded compliment.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, man.
Thank you.
It's hard to stay... It's hard to stay pissed off and serious sometimes when I haven't done radio with you in a while, because it's easy to banter back and forth with you. Anyway, getting back onto the subject of getting out of Dodge, Bob actually showed me a couple different areas that I didn't know about, and I had went and checked them out, and I found a place that I liked. And compared to where I am now, it is 180-degree opposite of where I am. And you know what? Honestly, I couldn't be happier. My wife and I are very excited about getting out of where I'm currently living. And it's not because, I'm going to be living completely off the grid and collecting rainwater and everything else, although that would be cool, as long as there wasn't any radiation or chemtrail garbage in it, right? Or we have to figure out a way to make a filter system to filter that out. But it's off the grid enough, and it's out surrounded by nothing but nature and, bugs and gators and whatever else happens to be walking around the woods. It's different than what I'm used to, and part of it is me practicing what I preach. Bob did the same thing. When I first met him, he was still living in the city type scape, I guess you could say, or a suburban / mini city type scape, and now he is out in the middle of nowhere as well.
See, that's the thing though, Popeye, because I kind of have gone through a number of different places in my life, physically, literally, and mentally. Physically, literally? No. Physically and mentally is what I meant to say. And before we met, I lived in Mexico, and I talk about this at the Free Your Mind conference discussion that I had last year. And I was completely, even way more so than what you got a chance to see when you came up here and visited. I was completely off the grid. I lived with no power. I had water that came from the mountains that ran on a hydraulic system. I lived off the ocean in my front yard and was surrounded by thousands and thousands of miles of mountains on all sides of me. But, of course, I didn't have community. And, you can get away from everything and run away and live in complete solitary confinement. But, at the end of the day, human beings, we do like to talk to one another and have some community and have, children. I was single at the time. And, so, Popeye, we all have different, I guess what I'm getting at here is, we're all in different places in our lives. And at the end of the day, just keep your eyes open. Just because you're, don't be too hard on yourself. Take baby steps. And eventually, I think it would probably be best that we all kind of get out of Dodge and get prepared and start to practice certain things like rainwater collecting and not, at the very least, being dependent on electricity. The internet went down today, Popeye, up here, and I said to my wife, I said, okay, that's it. The internet's down. And I said, the internet's down. Let's go plant some seeds in the garden now. No more internet. I guess Bob Tuskin's dead. Boom. As far as Bob Tuskin, the radio host, is concerned, you know what I mean? So there's no more Bob Tuskin, but heck, kind of go through that scenario in your mind. It's down, and now what? Are you able to be face-to-face with the people that you love and care about, and are you able to do that in an environment that's safe?
Have you ever seen people lose it, dude, when the power goes out? Like, compared to when I was a kid. Oh, yeah. I'm a little older than you, so I can look back and see things in an even broader spectrum. But you're an old soul. You're a pretty smart guy for your age group. You're very ahead of the people that are in your age bracket. You know what I mean? So you do comprehend stuff. And 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, if the power went out, people would be like, power's out, light a candle, break out a flashlight, read a book. When I was a kid, when the snowstorm, like a nor'easter, would tear through, like what they're freaking everybody out about right now, when one of those things, we had some really bad storms when I grew up in New Jersey, things would come in, knock the power out for a day or two. And you know what? You did what you had to do. We had a wood stove in the house that kept us warm. You could cook on it. I mean, and my house was in what I guess you could consider suburbia. But when my father installed a wood stove and built a chimney for the thing, because he said if the power goes out, you can still cook on it and you can still heat the house with it. And we did just that on numerous occasions. And you'd sit and read. If you had a book, you could read a book, go out. Actually, we'd go out and play in the snow until it was dark.
Yeah, if you know how to read, that is. And, I played outside as a kid. I didn't start getting on computers and that kind of thing until I was probably in my first year of college. And ironically, that corresponds with when I woke up, So 18 years old, I get a computer. Next thing I know, I'm watching 9/11 in plain sight. A year or so before Loose Change had it even came out, so. But at the end of the day, we've got all this knowledge now, and are we attached to it? If the computer goes down, then, do you still have the knowledge that you're going to need? If it's not at your fingertips, do you have it in a book? I get on these binges sometimes, Popeye, where I just want to print out stuff. I just want to print it out.
We relied on it for everything. And then the power went out. Everything stopped working. We weren't prepared. Fear and confusion led to panic. The lucky ones made it out of the cities. The government collapsed. Militias took over, controlling the food supply and stockpiling weapons. We still don't know why the power went out, but we're hopeful that someone will come and light the way.
Do you hear that, Popeye?
Are you kidding me? They don't know why the power went out?
That's the show. That's the premise of this show.
So they haven't figured out who effed up?
It's great. It's great. It's laughable, but the parts in there, the militia and the grid going. I mean, that's all reality.
I like the music. Dun, 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 dun. It's like building the anxiety in your chest as you're listening to it. That's what that's for, right? They do that on purpose.
We do the same thing with our radio shows.
Oh my God, you're going to create a conspiracy, Bob.
It's all neuro-linguistic programming, folks. You have to see the good in it. See, See, that was a little taste there of neurolinguistic programming. You just say things slow and you use generic, generalized terms like good.
Speaking of neurolinguistic programming, do you know who uses it a lot and whose first day happened to be on 9/11? His first broadcasting day was on 9/11, 2001.
Who's that?
Come on, I'll give you. He's one of the 3 loudmouth douchebags on air. I'll give you.
On talk radio?
He does talk radio and TV. So that narrows the field down for you.
Okay, is it my good friend and colleague from the Glenn Beck show? No, Glenn Beck? All right.
Come on, you got 2 more chances. Go ahead.
Is it Mossad Wolf Blitzer? I don't know. Who?
Nope.
I don't know.
Come on, he was on air before that. One more chance.
Right. Who's new? I don't know. Do you think I pay attention to these metrics? I don't know.
Sean Hannity.
Oh, was Sean? Did he really launch during 9/11?
Mm-hmm. It was his first broadcast.
Jeez, that guy's been around for only that long, huh?
Yeah, well,
feels like we've been with him my whole life.
Exactly. Do you see how he was input into the trauma-based mind control event and in people's heads? He was a comfort figure. And now people are like, well, Henry said it, it must be true. Really? Where was this guy before the day of 9/11?
He was hanging out with Combs.
I won't even go there. All right. Hour 1 up, hour 2 coming up. Ladies and gentlemen, when we get back, I'm going to play in the beginning of hour 2 the audio from Bob interviewing Patrick Clawson, the Zionist shill calling for a false flag terror event to start World War III. So stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on today's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. It is the Sunday edition, October 28th, 2012. I'm hanging out with my good friend, radio broadcaster, NWO pest, to say the least, Mr. Bob Tuskin. And as we discussed in hour number 1, I'm going to play the audio of him confronting Patrick Clawson. He called him up. He got his phone number, called him up, asked him some real questions. And I mean, Bob didn't, threaten him or wasn't yelling or screaming into the phone and, standing on his desk with a bullhorn. He was just asking the guy real, honest questions, and he actually got an answer out of the guy. But the answer is very telling. I mean, the guy, I'll let you hear it for yourself. I don't even want to try to give you any false pretenses. I want you to hear it right from the guy's mouth. So this is Bob interviewing Patrick Clawson. Check it out.
Can I get one last comment? And this one can it be on the record about false flag commentary that a lot of people are sending around the web.
I think if you listen to my the interview we posted on YouTube, I explain how I think that it's wonderful that the United States has a long history of not going to war easily and waiting until another side makes its intentions clear. So, for instance, while the United States was very concerned about World War II, we did not get involved in that war until we were attacked at Pearl Harbor. And we did not get involved in World War I until the Lusitania episode. And I think that it would also be if in fact the confrontation with Iran continues, that I would hope the way the situation evolves is that if diplomacy is not going to be successful, that we can be sufficiently patient and wait long enough that if there has to be a war, that Iran is the one that starts the war rather than us starting directly. And that is what I was give several examples about that were featured in that YouTube. That I said that the United States should be prepared to wait until such time as we see if, in fact, if a confrontation gets worse and worse, Iran's prepared to settle, or if instead Iran starts a confrontation.
Right.
And I frankly think that would be better. Now, I don't know if that's what's going to end up happening. I hope that diplomacy is what happens. But if the diplomacy is not successful, then I hope that we will be able to be patient enough that it does come to force, it's because the other side strikes first, and not because we rush into a war.
A lot of people are concerned, though, that the other side striking first would be a manufactured incident, and they have lots of reason to believe that. Looking at some of the incidents that you mentioned, there's a good percentage of people that have looked at declassified government documents that show that this was manifested by our own powers that shouldn't be.
I understand that during World War II, there were many people who thought that this was Mr. Roosevelt's war, and that the attack on Pearl Harbor had somehow been provoked by Mr. Roosevelt. And we know from his memoirs that former President Hoover was of that opinion. I don't agree. And I think that, in fact, that in many situations, that it's miscalculation on the other side leads to war, and people are quite surprised that this miscalculation takes place. Was it Japanese miscalculated attacking Pearl Harbor? And I would hope that we can be clear enough that the Iranians understand that we are firm in our convictions, and they decide to compromise. But if that's not what happens, then I hope that we can be patient enough that we wait and see if they're prepared to settle, or if instead they start a confrontation.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned real quick that the Mossad is involved, as we speak, in covert operations. They've taken responsibility openly.
So the United States has been involved in sabotage of the Iranian program. We've acknowledged that in the court, and as a result of a complicated court suit. The United States has been involved in illegal overflights of Iranian territory with the drones. The United States has been involved in recruiting Iranian who worked in the nuclear program. There was a gentleman who showed up here in Washington, D.C., and then was silly enough to go back to Iran. So the United States has been involved in the shadow war. Someone who spent some time at the Washington Institute, named David Christ, wrote a book about the Twilight War, he called it. He described a whole lot of things. David Sanger, the New York Times, has written an account in which he gives, I think, a reason to think that President Obama was very involved in the planning for the Stuxnet cyber war against Iran. And in fact, Stuxnet was part of a larger campaign.
Yeah, and now we have the flame virus as well, which is also
exactly.
You know, a
so the United States has been involved in a shadow war against Iran. The Mossad's been more involved in the shadow war, but the Iranians certainly have been involved in the shadow war against the United States. I mean, we lost, after all, more than 200 Americans in Beirut all those years ago. We lost people in Khobar Towers. We lost a great many people in Iraq to Iranian-sponsored and supplied improvised explosive devices. So Iran's been involved in a shadow war against the United States for many years as well. The Treasury Department...
And people talk about their connection, Patrick, with 9/11. Do you feel that Iran was somehow partially responsible for that?
Well, the Treasury Department this last week a process called designated as Al-Qaeda's principal agent in Iran, and the Treasury Department provided a description of the close cooperation between Iran and Al-Qaeda. On condition that Al-Qaeda not engage in attack in Iran, Iran has been prepared to see Al-Qaeda operating in its country and through its country. And now, Iran, I see no evidence that Iran knew about 9/11 in advance, but Iran has been found in a federal court of law to, with testimonies by myself and a great many people from the 9/11 Commission, Iran provided some logistics Al-Qaeda before, during, and after the 9/11 attacks. Under the U.S. law, that's enough to find Iran to be responsible for assisting in the 9/11 attacks.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were involved with that case. I remember hearing that a number of months ago now. But my question is, you know, we've had this case, but where is the case about the Mossad agents that were found on the Washington Bridge and in fact reported by the mainstream media to have been involved with 9/11?
I find that extraordinarily implausible. And I would just say that I would defer to the 911 Commission, which I think had a much more detailed investigation of this than anyone else.
Interesting. All right, fair enough.
Okay.
And that's the end of the interview. Now, you see how he says, I find that implausible. He says that he openly admits that they're engaged, that Mossad is engaged in shadow wars, but not against the United States, and definitely not involving 9/11. No way. You're crazy. You see how he got really uncomfortable and ended? He was flowing. He was being Mr. Propagandist against the Iranian government. And because Bob wasn't yelling at him and telling him to shut up, the guy was he kept going. Until Bob asked him a question about the van full of Israelis arrested by the George Washington Bridge. That's right. I've talked about it on air because I actually heard the radio calls when I was standing in Giant Stadium that day at the staging area that the New Jersey State Police had set up at the time. And I remember hearing the radio call where they had these guys and they had arrested them. I've talked about it on air before. In fact, I'm going to find the audio for you guys during the break and play that too, just to back it up. It's a quick news report from the mainstream media at the time, one of the local CBS affiliates, I believe it was. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. If you want to take part in the show as I'm broadcasting live, you can always go to federaljack.com and click on the banner in the upper right-hand corner. It says Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye. It's got the green checkered background and the Orion banner. You can click on that. That'll bring you right to the Listen Live and chat page. Because during the broadcast, I will, from time to time, drop links to what myself and my guests are talking about. And I just dropped a link in there right now, right before we came back in, to an article on Federal Jack backing up what I was talking about before we went into break. And there's actually two different instances. Okay, hang on a second. Now remember, actually three, I should say. I'll try to find the audio from the NYPD, but they actually caught a bunch of guys trying to blow up a van or trying to detonate a van with explosives in New York that day. And it turned out they were Israeli citizens as well, and then they were linked to the Mossad. Well, you also have the case of the dancing Israelis. And people will always say, oh, you're just trying to be an anti-Semite. There was no people that were happy from Israel. Okay, well, I posted the link. You can go to federaljack.com, look at it. Title of the article is Cop Who Arrested the 5 Dancing Israelis on 9/11 Speaks Out. And it goes into the guy. He talks about how he had he was a local New Jersey police officer, and they had pulled these guys over because they had gotten a phone call from the lady that saw them videotaping and cheering and everything else and holding up a lighter. So when they pulled them out of the car, they were like, "We're on your side. We're Israeli." Blah 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 blah. And they didn't. He says, we didn't care who they were at that point. And there's video of this too. Just go on YouTube before it gets pulled and yank it if you have a video downloading software, and copy it. And I would urge you to do the same thing. In fact, do the same thing with Tuskin's interview. Just go to the Intel Hub's YouTube channel. It's Not For Sale, the number 2 NWO, and it's one of the last things they uploaded. And rip the video, so that way you have the video and the audio of that event in case it ever goes missing from the internet, because YouTube does like to just delete things and they don't care. Anyway, you can see how they pulled them over, and they were like, yeah, we were, blah, 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 we're on your side. So go check it out. The title of the article is Cop Who Arrested the 5 Dancing Israelis on 9/11 Speaks Out. And then there's the audio that I promised you about the GWB incident. Okay, let me see if I can find the... Let me see if I can find the button here. There you go. And get this thing to refresh where I want it to refresh.
George Washington Bridge,
There you
Marcia.
go. Check this out.
Well, you know, Todd, it's really an amazing thing. Most of New York City's rescue operations and their police and fire departments have been concentrating their actions down in lower Manhattan, where the two planes hit the two towers of the World Trade Center. But some very intelligent and aggressive cops also stopped another terrorist attack from happening on the George Washington Bridge. CBS 2 has learned exclusively that two men are in custody tonight after being arrested at the George Washington Bridge with an entire truckload of explosives. Now, I'm told that those explosives could have been enough to blow up the entire span and all the cars and the people that were on it. But nevertheless, they were arrested. I'm told they were arrested somehow near the Meadowlands, but the explosives were destined for underneath the George Washington Bridge. Again, a tragedy has been averted. The George Washington Bridge still stands because of some aggressive police work on the part of New York City and Port Authority police officers. It's really an amazing story, and amazing how they were able to actually apprehend them.
Marcia, any idea on the timing of that? Is that something that just happened, or was that supposed to occur? Do we have any idea earlier in the day today?
Well, I don't know the timing exactly. I know that there was police and Port Authority police on the scene, but I can tell you that as recently as 15 minutes ago, Police Commissioner Bernard Carrick was talking about it, telling the mayor about it with a great deal of pride.
So perhaps this did not happen that long ago, because they would have discussed it earlier today. I know this information has just come to you. Any idea at all how, in the midst of all that has gone on in Manhattan today, as well as in Washington, these police managed to stop this truck and avert this kind of disaster? Any tips that they gave you?
Well, here's the thing. As you know, when New York City goes into a full security alert, the first thing that they do is they look at the bridges and tunnels going into New York City, because they are regarded as major potential targets. They look at the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, and the George Washington Bridge, and also, to a lesser extent, the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel and the Midtown Tunnel. And they're looking at those tunnels, and they're trying to prevent anybody that looks suspicious from going across. Apparently what happened in this case is that you had two people in a truck who looked suspicious. Police gave chase. They stopped the truck. They found an entire truck full of explosives, and they arrested them. Those two men and their explosives are in police custody tonight, and another tragedy has been averted.
So, two men and their explosives are in police custody, and another tragedy was averted. But I didn't hear about that in the official version of events. Did you? I know about it because, as I said, I heard the broadcast over the police radios, because I was standing in the head. It was in the late afternoon. I was standing in the command center radio area where they had set up staging in Giant Stadium, which is no longer there, by the way. The original Giant Stadium is demolished. I don't know if they've built something new there, but I know they demolished the old Giant Stadium. But that's where it was on 9/11. And as I said, I heard them call, and they didn't discuss, you didn't hear CBS say that the men were Israeli, but they were. They weren't Arabs. It's funny how they didn't ask them the nationality of the people. They didn't ask them if they were connected to they really didn't get into details. They just covered it. And it was because they were forced to, because all the local, and it was, again, this was a local affiliate at the time, but a lot of the local area stations, like WPIX, I don't know what it's channel 11 up there. I don't know if it was WPIX. I think it was WPIX back in the day too. But it's where that guy Lionel's from. They were carrying different information. As I said, the local radio stations around the area, we were hearing different broadcasts. Where I lived, we could pick up certain broadcasts from Pennsylvania. And my mom liked to listen to the radio. And she was listening, and I remember her, calling me in and having me listen to the radio. And they said that they were talking about Flight 93 at the time, but we didn't, it wasn't the legendary Flight 93. That legend hadn't been born yet. And all they said was there was another plane headed in from Pennsylvania, either towards the Capitol or towards New York, but there was Air Force F-16s following it or trailing it. Or I don't even think they said Air Force. They just said there were planes, and I think they said F-16 fighters, if I remember correctly. Well, not too long afterwards is when reports came out. Flight 93 went down, it crashed, blah, 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 blah. Long story short, within a few minutes of that, you could hear flying real low the unmistakable sound of F-2 F-16s just tearing ass across the sky, and they were flying real low. And I've told a few people about this. My mother and I walked down. She's the only other person that witnessed this that was there with me, and unfortunately my poor mother's passed on. Otherwise, if she were alive, she'd be able to corroborate this. But we walked outside and looked up, and there 2 F-16s came ripping over my house where I lived in Jersey, headed towards New York City. So low that you could literally see the weapons underneath the wings. Fully armed. We're going to break, ladies and gentlemen. We will be right back. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. And I wanted to get on to a little bit about preparations and things. Bob will be hopefully joining us again back in either later this segment or the last segment today. He had to go take care of little Bob Tuskin. Yes, Bob is a father, a new recent father, and he is actually a really good dad. A lot of people probably thought that Bob would, he's young, maybe wouldn't be a good attentive father, but he actually is very attentive, and he had to go take care of some daddy stuff. So hopefully he'll be joining us again, either the end of this segment or next segment. If not, it's not a big deal. Bob has contributed already a ton to the broadcast today. So everybody, give a big shout out to Bob. Say thank you. Just in case he doesn't join us again, thanks, Bob. And if you do, then we'll see you in a few. So I want to get onto preparation solutions type stuff because time's just flying by. And I've talked about the Mossad. I've talked about 9/11. I don't want to just focus on that. I'm not saying, I don't want to hear, why don't you want to focus on it? Because I talk about it all the time. I put the stuff out there. Go ahead, check it out. Research it for yourself. But there's other things I want to get into. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom today. And there's a few things I wanted to address about this hurricane. Because in the beginning of the broadcast, I was saying, don't be afraid, blah, 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 blah. And everybody, I might have come off like I was trying to make fun of the hurricane like it's not a serious issue. Look, the hurricane is a serious thing. But you shouldn't be afraid of it, okay? Having primal fear of something like a storm or a shark or something, that is normal. That feeling of anxiety you get, that is normal. You're not a sissy or a wimp for experiencing that or feeling that fear. You would be an idiot if you didn't feel that fear and try to and deal with it. You would be what the controllers want you to be. They disconnected from your own feelings, and then you don't know what to do because you're all jammed up. It's okay to feel like that. It's okay to be afraid of something like a huge hurricane, especially if you're in an area up there, and then you're being bombarded by the media and the government going, oh my God, it's a storm of the century, you're gonna die. I understand it. I totally get it. But don't buy into the fear. Just prepare yourself, that's all. Prepare for what's possible. Prepare for the worst. Hope for the best. Like the Marines say, pray for peace, train for war, or prepare for war. You want to be prepared. You want to be ready to rock. You don't want to face the worst case scenario and only be prepared for maybe the best case, right? No. How about you prepare for the worst, and then anything else that comes down the pike, you're already prepared for the worst case. So when it comes down, and if it's only half as bad as they say, well, then it's not as bad as you thought, and you're totally chill. I know that the propaganda that you're taught by the government now, by DHS, if you have more than 7 days worth of food, you're a terrorist, which is ridiculous. Down here in Florida, they teach us to have 2 weeks at least of supplies. And I mean water, like potable water. People really wanted to go bathe or whatever, even though it's salt water. They could go bathe in the ocean if they wanted to. And there are lakes and canals. I mean, there are certain areas I wouldn't do that because you probably go to become gator food. But the ocean itself, if you really, I mean, that's how the homeless down here do it on Miami Beach. They go out and they bathe themselves in the ocean. So if you had to, you could do that. There is ways around it. And then you could figure out a way to rinse the salt off, whatever. There's ways to get around it. There is things that you could do to survive not having water for 2 weeks to bathe in. But you wouldn't be able to survive without water to drink. So you need separate potable water. You need sternos, things like that. You need, I would recommend having a little propane oven. I have one. I can roll it out and I have little propane canisters I can hook up to it and cook on. I have a sterno camping stove. I can cook with sternos. In case people don't know what a sterno is, sterno's the little canisters where when you go to like a buffet, they light them and it keeps your food warm. Yeah, you can cook with those too. I was a Boy Scout when I was a kid, so I learned how to cook on a camping stove, and I actually still have one. And I have fresh sternos for it. I have strike anywhere matches. They wanted to outlaw those because God forbid you have a match that you could have out in the woods and strike on a rock and start a campfire for yourself. That would just make sense. Well, because kids could strike them, Popeye, and, house fires have been caused. Oh, stop it with the protection of the kids bullshit. It's from the same people that pimp kids out. Ugh. Anyway, I suggest you prepare yourself. So, strike anywhere matches. What I've also said to get, I've talked about this on many radio broadcasts, tampons. And people are like, tampons? What do you mean tampons? Well, one, in case you have a female with you, but that's not the only reason. And any Marine or Army infantry will tell you that tampons are useful if you get shot because you can literally plug the bullet holes and it'll stop the bleeding.
They got better stuff than that, Popeye.
Oh, Bob, welcome back. What else would you say for like?
Well, they actually sell products for gunshot wounds, and tampon would be good to be on. If you're on a last result sort of deal, worst case scenario rather, then use a tampon. But they sell stuff like that, and these are all things that you should buy and consider having. Even things I'm sure you mentioned a TP, toilet paper. I think that's a vital resource to have.
Oh, dude, I tell people all the time, buy toilet paper, and I've had people in my family like laugh, like why do you have so much toilet paper? And I'm like, look, you can laugh all you want, but when the shit hits the fan, at least I can wipe my ass comfortably. Do you know how horrible life will be if little comforts like being able to put on a pair of fresh socks, whether or not you wash them in the sink or in a river or whatever and dry them out in the sun. The point is being able to put on some pair of socks that haven't been worn for 3 or 4 days and being able to wipe your ass with toilet paper. It's amazing how horrible situations can be rode out with or ridden out, or however whatever the grammar is. I'm sure the grammar Nazis are going to email me. Contact DTRH@yahoo.com. Go ahead and tell me, you said it wrong, Popeye. But however you ride out the storm, we'll say, it's a lot easier if you can wipe your ass. And I'm not being, this isn't poop jokes or anything like, I'm being serious. I've gone without power for weeks because of hurricanes. I've been through multiple storms. Trust me when I tell you that you can ride out a lot. You can deal without having electricity. If you have candles and things like that and flashlights, you can deal with a lot of stuff. But wiping your ass with like grass and leaves is a real bitch. It's much better to have some toilet paper. Remember, you can burn toilet paper. It's paper. So if you had to, you could create a fire pit just to get rid of that and kill the bacteria. There is always that option. Use your noodle. Well, you can't do that, I guess, if you live in an apartment complex. And well, you could if you made a community fire pit, I guess.
Garbage bags for to stay along the same lines here, your feces. What happens when the sewage goes out? And a lot of people live with septic tanks, but a lot of people are also dependent on those septic tanks being, taken somewhere, or they're dependent on the city processing their waste. And with a garbage bag and human manure, you can discard of your waste, but you have to learn how to do that. And it might seem like something, crazy and out of this world, but it really is something you need to consider.
I agree. You can mulch your own waste depending on what you're taking in. If you're popping pills and stuff, well, then that's just a whole different thing anyway. And besides, riding out a shit hitting the fan scenario is going to be a real rough thing for you anyway. If you're dependent on chemical medications like that, that's a whole nother issue. All right, we got a break sneaking up on us. Ladies and gentlemen, do not go anywhere. We will be right back in a few minutes. More preparations and solutions. Final segment coming up. Don't go anywhere. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. The final segment of today's episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Don't forget to stay tuned in for Joe Joseph, Tim Watts, Conspiracy Chronicles today. I believe they have John Hankey coming on, the guy who did JFK to the Bush Connection, which he did a revamp of the movie. He added like another 20 or 30 minutes. It's got a different name, but I believe Hankey's coming on to talk about the Bush Connection to JFK today, so if I remember correctly. So tune in for that. Okay. When we went to break, Bob and I were throwing out some ideas for preparations. And as I was saying about the hurricane, I wasn't bashing anybody that's afraid of it. I understand how they put the fear out there, but just be prepared. Don't use emotion when you look at things like that. Use logic. It's natural to feel that feeling, but if you understand that that's a natural response to some of the chemicals that are being released in our bodies because our bodies are chemically dependent, then just relax. Look at things with a clear head. If you're prepared, people constantly wait till the last minute. We had a tropical storm, I forget what the hell it was called, whatever it was, came through here a couple weeks ago. And I was prepared. Everybody, there was a lot of people down here that were freaking out. Oh my God, I have to go to the store and go buy this and go buy that. And I didn't have to do anything because I had all of my stuff that already chilling. So I was relaxed. I was doing other stuff while everybody around me was flipping out. I've had that happen before. When Hurricane Wilma hit years ago, I had preparations. I was putting wood up. My friends were all laughing at me till we didn't have power for 2 weeks. And I was the only one that had any preparations to last it out. And everybody wanted to come over and eat all of my food and use all my preparations. And I said, nope, because if I give you all my crap, then I won't have anything left for 2 or 3 days. So some of them, we came up with ideas like everybody getting together in the apartment complex or wherever they lived, and everybody would bring stuff from their freezers first. I gave away all the food from my freezer that I had that I didn't want anyway, that I wasn't going to, wasn't my part of my prep because there was no power. Everything was going to go bad. So the first couple of days, people were having big potluck dinners. Again, community. That's how you survive stuff like this. Not through freaking out and being emotional, and it's just not a way to do it. If you can get together with a few people around you and make preparations, you sit down and have a little meeting or whatever. All get together for coffee one day and say, look, we should come up with a plan that if, a storm comes in and we don't have power or something like a natural disaster or something happens, we have a plan that we can help each other and take care of each other, that we don't have to rely on somebody else from the outside. And where I'm going, that's what I plan on doing. Bob knows what I'm talking about because he lives out in the middle of nowhere. I'm sure he's gotten together or plans on getting together with some of his neighbors to figure out a plan as to what to do if it hits the fan. And he understands the concept of community. We need to get together. That's part of this, as I said on Friday. We are the solution to the problems. They're hyping the hell out of this hurricane and trying to scare the crap out of everybody. It's a storm of biblical proportions. When it hits, what's it going to be? A Category 1 at the most? New Jersey has been hit by bigger storms before. But then this low pressure front is going to come down. And I was watching the Weather Channel. They're saying some of the lowest pressures ever and all this other crap. So, okay, are they doing this on purpose? Is there any geoengineering involved? Could be, but that's another thing. We need to stop screaming and yelling, oh my God, it's definitely geoengineering. We don't know that yet. And by going out, well, see, I hate with that. That gives that whole concept of geoengineering and weather modification a bad name. When instantly, every time there's a storm or something that happens, that it's instantly HARP. I mean, what happens if it's a side effect of all this crap that they're spraying in the sky? I'm not saying it can't be and they can't control stuff. Obviously, there's something going on because it is obviously a little weird. But I don't think we should jump to conclusions and yell that it's definitely this or that unless we have evidence. And I don't mean just because some website says that it shows the power output of HARP. How do we know that that's really the website? Look, I've done this before in the past, and then I thought about it logically. I'm not saying it can't be. I'm not trying to piss in the cornflakes. I'm just saying we need to gather as much evidence, scientific evidence and proof that this thing, let's try to find satellite photos and see if there's chemtrails on the leading edges of the storm. Let's see if let's look on a global, map and see if there's any high pressure things coming in and moving the jet stream around to maybe drag this low pressure down and create, drag more cold air in. Let's look into that. But let's not just fly off the handle right off the bat screaming, it's this, it's that, because then that gives it gives the idea of geoengineering and stuff a bad name. That's just my personal take on it. We need to take another, whether or not it is controlled by HARP or whatever or not, isn't going to stop the hurricane right now from hitting those people, right? So instead of instilling that kind of fear into them, let's instill be prepared, community, get together, blah, 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 right? Don't fear, all that. Let's give them that kind of energy and then investigate it. But don't put out that it's, geoengineering, they're going to wipe everybody out for the October surprise. That's the kind of fear crap that these controlling scumbags thrive on. Because now you have the alternative media community, whatever, all a buzz about this stuff, right? What else aren't they focusing on? Are they? And they're also putting out this negative fear. Oh my God! Geoengineering. I'm not saying it's not possible, but we have to stop falling prey to being used. Again, remember, everybody likes to be awake and doesn't like to be used, right? And didn't like the fact that we were used and didn't know about it. Well, a lot of us are being used again, and we're not even realizing it.
Popeye, I get what you're trying to say here, but I still can look at the issue of HARP and chemtrails being involved with this storm and some of the possibilities and have it compartmentalized from, the jumping to conclusion, the fear-mongering.
But you're not jumping to conclusions. You're using logic. As I said, look into it. But just don't, I don't think it's good for people to be just running around instantly pointing the finger saying, I know it. No, we don't. We don't know anything right now. And right now, that's kind of a secondary issue to the fact that we should be telling everybody, be prepared, get together, blah, 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 blah. And then at the same time, do the investigation into it and get more evidence. So that way, if it really is being controlled by them, we can prove it more than just going, well, it's HARP. Look up Dr. Nick Begich or Bernard Eastland, or you know what I mean, or Nikola Tesla. Instead of just throwing out some of these blanket names and statements to, attribute things to, let's have the data. Let's have everything lined up so when the haters are going to come hate, we can knock them down. Boom, 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 boom. Here's the evidence. Eat it.
I do know, Popeye, for a fact that they were spraying this storm. And here's how I know. I saw them spraying the storm. As Hurricane Sandy passed far off the East Coast here in Florida, they were spraying the hell out of our skies. And they spray anyways, for that matter, so who knows what that means.
Well, no, that's why that's why I said, check out see if they sprayed the leading edges of it, because I've been super busy doing my own stuff here, so I haven't been able to keep an eye on Hurricane Sandy, okay? I have not really paid attention to, I've monitored the strength of the storm and everything, but I haven't been seeing if it was steered or anything like that, as I have with other storms in the past. And there's other people out there paying attention that'll do it. That's why I said it's good to investigate it, but let's not just jump to conclusions. But if there's chemtrailing being done, okay, that goes to show that there is a level of geoengineering. Why are they spraying the leading edges of the storm? What are they doing? What's their goal? Why are they letting the storm? Here's my question. Why are they letting the storm make that left turn? Why don't they park a high pressure dome right off of the East Coast and let that thing bounce up into the North Atlantic? That's my question.
I also thought that cold water for hurricanes was supposed to deplete the storm.
Well, again, that's why there are signs of something going on. But let's get all the ducks in a row so we don't fall flat in our face just by pointing fingers at the usual suspects, so then people can go, oh, these crazy conspiratards. Let's be like, no, here's the scientific evidence. Eat it and slam it on the table. That's what we need to do. That's how we need to handle this. We need to make it, because, I mean, this storm obviously does show signs of geoengineering, and I'm not poo-pooing geoengineering. It exists. But if we're going to bring this to the masses who... I mean, I have comments. One of my favorite comments on the Hurricane Erin video that I made last year is, if you think that I believe in conspiracies, but if you think, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, if you think man has the ability to control the weather, you're out of your mind. You know, only God has that power, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, wow, dude. You know, obviously you have never looked into geoengineering or weather modification or the fact that the U.S. government's been doing it for like 50 years. But I guess pay no attention to that, right? You know, don't look at the man behind the curtain. So, yeah, I know geoengineering exists and everything, and I just want to make sure that before we jump to conclusions, we have enough scientific evidence. So that way when the haters come up and the doubters come up, we can just knock them all down like bowling pins and prove it. And maybe this can show and can prove that they can control the weather. But let's not just jump to conclusions. Let's make sure we have a really strong case. Let's look at it like a prosecutor would prosecuting a trial. All right, we are out of time, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, don't fear that hurricane. It is what it is. Prepare, community, get together. Bob, thank you for coming on my show, brother. I appreciate it.
Looking forward to Freedom Link Radio coming up next.
Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you tune into the Bob Tuskin radio broadcast 5 days a week, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over on Oracle. And Bob's got a whole bunch of new, exciting things coming up, so stay tuned and check him out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. Love you all. No fear, only love. We are out.